Eu vou começar aqui, então, fazendo as introduções. Boa tarde, pessoal. Eu sou Leandro. Para quem não me conhece, sou aluno de doutorado do INSPER. A nossa sessão de hoje vai ter apenas 2 apresentações. Infelizmente, a Gisele não pôde comparecer, então teremos só 2 apresentações. Nós escolhemos fazer a apresentação em inglês. Acho que isso tem sido um pedido da SBE também, dado que podem ter pessoas que futuramente vão ver os vídeos e não falem português, ou, enfim, só entendam inglês. Então, as 2 apresentações vão ser em inglês. Como a gente só tem 2 apresentações, a gente vai ter a situação inusitada de ter mais tempo do que provavelmente a apresentação. Então, a participação de todo mundo é importante. Assim, eu vou pedir que vocês coloquem as perguntas no chat, e aí eu vou, no caso do Felipe, eu vou moderando essas perguntas depois da apresentação. Então, eu acho que o ideal seria a gente deixar as perguntas para o final, a menos que seja alguma dúvida muito importante, assim, muito relevante. Mas a gente deve ter, depois da apresentação, tempo mais do que suficiente para discutir, para fazer todas as perguntas. Então, sem mais, eu vou passar a palavra agora ao Felipe, que vai fazer a apresentação dele.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay, let's screen share. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so my name is Felipe Neves. I'm a professor of business at UFRN, and today I'm going to deliver this presentation on my PhD dissertation paper, okay? And it's important to say that this paper actually, in this format, it is a work in progress, because the original idea was part of my dissertation, but this paper now is part of a series of papers of a large project called Observatório do Empreendedorismo. This project is held by me, I'm the coordinator, but I have as co-authors of this paper and the others, Professor Luciano Sampaio from UFRN and Professor Renato Lima de Oliveira, who is an assistant professor at Asia School of Business in collaboration with MIT Sloan. It is a new institution located at Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Okay, so this paper is called Peer Effects and Entrepreneurship, Evidence on Gender Homophily. And I would like to start talking about the motivation of this paper, okay? So what drives an individual to start a new venture? So we know that a lot of research have been performed on the topic of the factors associated with the entrepreneurial activity, but we found a gap concerning the identity and the social effects on this decision to become an entrepreneur, okay? So empirical evidence shows that entrepreneurial behavior, is associated with institutional, economic, and social factors. Since entrepreneurship is an activity related to uncertainties, being in a social group with knowledge of entrepreneurial activity could make the future less unpredictable, okay? So the main mechanisms of social transmission among educational peers are the exchange of information about business activities and the transmission of entrepreneurial values and aspirations of career. So the literature points out that the decision to become an entrepreneur is not only associated with financial motivations, okay? So we have also the utility of being an entrepreneur as a status quo position in society. So in the context of young individuals, a vast literature argues that family is one of the leading social groups that shape the propensity to entrepreneurship. Which means that having entrepreneurial parents increases the probability of an individual to become an entrepreneur. And this effect is called intergenerational transmission of entrepreneurial behavior. Okay, so this is an important part of our paper because due to the age range of our observations, we needed to use the instrumental variable approach. Okay, In addition to intergenerational transmission, the educational environment provides a reference group that can shape entrepreneurial behavior, where students build their identity and exchange social experiences. So the educational environment is a very important part of the formation of an individual, because you can interact with others, with similars, with peers, and then you can absorb uh, some thoughts, some insights about occupational choice, okay? And the main theoretical approach of this is the perspective of entrepreneurial identity, which relies on the expansion of the rational maximization utility concept, okay? As I said before, it's not about just money. It's about job satisfaction, perceived utility image of being an entrepreneur as well. In the case of students, identity construction would be shaped not only through entrepreneurial education courses and actions to foment entrepreneurship, but by living with classmates with interest in entrepreneurship. So, of course, the courses and subjects perform some effect on the decision to become an entrepreneur, but we argue that the environment, the peers, are an important part as well in, in the elements to an individual decide to become an entrepreneur, okay? Also, a gender homophily can perform an essential role in the constitution of a social group. Um, we selected the homophily theory because the act to entrepreneur, to start a business, is a behavioral act. So this transmission through homophily, for those who, guys, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is sometimes varying a little bit, but so if you could start talking about gender homophily again, I think it's helpful because we lost you in some parts here.
Okay, so sorry. All right, so gender homophily is a theory that explains that an individual can be influenced by peers, of course, but the gender performs a boost in this transmission of behavior. Homophily is associated with the features of individuals. For example, if I have some interest in business, probably my network could have the same interest, okay? And I can influence and be influenced by my network. So, which leads to an endogeneity problem, okay? Which is called Munsky reflection problem in other fields. So gender homophily actually means that individuals are more propense, have more probability to interact with individuals from the same gender, specifically in the context of educational classrooms, okay? So do similar characteristics, features, and interests, which allows a profound exchange of management information about entrepreneurial activity between peers, okay? Which could foster interest in entrepreneurship. So another gap that we found in the literature is an important issue, and this is where our paper relies, because previous studies suffer some problems, some issues with proper identification of peers. For example, a very relevant paper of peer effects and entrepreneurship considered as peers individuals who shares the same alma mater. And then Kapertzik, she's the author of this paper, considered as peers individuals who went to the same college at a period of time. Okay, so for example, if you, Leandro, now is in INSPER, right? Okay, so another individual who studies at INSPER as well could be considered as your peer, but you know, this is a strong assumption that you guys have interacted, but in my opinion and in my co-author's opinion, this is an opportunity to build a paper with a proper identification of peers. Okay, so our two research questions are: can being exposed to a group of potential entrepreneur classmates affect the chance of opening a business? And does gender boost the peer effect of the transmission of entrepreneurial behavior? Okay. And in order to do so, our identification strategy is based on instrumental variables, okay? And I would like to address some important features of our paper because one of the main issues, as I said before, is a proper identification that allows assuming interaction between the individuals. And we had access to a unique data set from IFRN, um, the Instituto Federal de Tecnologia do Rio Grande do Norte. And then we were able to track members of the same classroom during all course, okay, which provides an opportunity of assessing peer effect on the propensity to start a new business. Another advantage in this data set is that the individuals don't have any mobility between classes, okay? In a undergrad course, for example, you can take some classes, some subjects with different groups of people, different classes, okay? So at the FRN, you don't have this possibility of mobility, you know? So you start your course with a group of people, your classmates, and then you have to finish this course with these guys, okay? And then we assume that peer effect via classmates is a stronger assumption than the prior identification strategies, because those guys are in the same classroom, which means they probably would have a minimum level of interaction, okay? And so we consider peers the students who share the same alma mater, the same classroom, but the other papers considering sharing the same alma mater. So our sample is a less small than others. Okay, we have like 11,000 students in comparison to other studies, which has almost 50,000 observations. But we believe that our data is a better fit for these research questions. Okay. All right, so talking about our data set is composed of almost 11,000 students from the Brazilian Institute of Technology here in Northeast. And the data set covers the period from 2001 to 2010. In other events, people ask, wow, it's a kind of old data. But it's important to say that we consider in 2010 the year that the individual started the course. So the courses on average have like 4 years until the finish. Okay, so an individual who started the course in 2010 will finish the course, will graduate around 2013, 14, okay? And then we needed some time to evaluate if the individual, after graduating, if he became an entrepreneur, in fact, because a lot of studies considering as a proxy to entrepreneurial activity, entrepreneurial intention. So the individual has the intention to undertake, but it not necessarily converted in action, you know. He could have a very strong intention to undertake, but in fact he could be a public servant or follow another occupational choice. Okay. Also, it's important to highlight that we drop observations from classes that had less than 10 students. Okay. Moreover, we removed students who attended less than one school year in the same classroom. Okay, so imagine that the individual started the course, but he stayed like 1 month and then dropped out. So we decided to remove this kind of observations. Okay, so our final sample is around 11,000 students, but the original data set is composed of almost 20,000 students, okay? The selection of a vocational training institution provides a unique cultural exchange environment in which individuals share experiences, values, and behaviors, okay? So individuals of pre-employment age have their entrepreneurial intentions shaped not by previous entrepreneurial and professional experiences, but by their identity, which is built at the educational environment, you know, because if we are talking to undergrad students, they have like a propension to a kind of occupational choice. For example, the guy could follow sociology, so probably his occupational choice leads to a low level of entrepreneurial intentions. So another advantage to deal with students in this range of age is the possibility to deal with data before they have this entrepreneurial or occupational choice molded, shaped by the job market, okay? And then we consider entrepreneurs those individuals who own the company in at least one company of legal nature. So we are talking about formal entrepreneurial activity because we are not able to evaluate if the individual started a business, but it was a informal initiative, okay? And concerning the profession of parents, which is important to our identification strategy, uh, around 13% of the students were children of an entrepreneur father. Around 8% of the students were children of an entrepreneurial mother, okay? All right, so I talked about the age, okay? So let's talk about our dependent variable. So we use the dummy metric that represents whether an individual was not an entrepreneur at time t minus one, which means before joining the FRN, but became, guys, I'm so sorry. It is happening.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. So we consider entrepreneurs those individuals who had registered in the Brazilian Individual Micro Entrepreneur Program. It's called MEI, or in any case, the individual had shareholding in enterprises with Brazilian National Registry of Legal Entities, CNPJ, within the interval from his admission to the institution until 5 years after graduation. So within 5 years after graduate, we track this individual as suggested by Marcuson and Rode, okay? And our variable of interest is the fraction of entrepreneurs in the classroom J, excepting the focal individual, okay? And we used variables related to student personal, social, and economic factors as controls. Moreover, we applied two-stage probit regressions, which allows us to deal with potential endogeneity in the social behavior, as well as the binary nature of the dependent variable, which is 0 if the individual choose another occupational choice, but entrepreneurship, and 1 if the guy decided to become an entrepreneur, okay? And we used the parents' profession of the peers as an instrument of entrepreneurial activity, being classified as entrepreneurs who had at least one parent working as entrepreneur, okay? Is that clear?
Yes, it is clear, but if you prefer to do it now or later, Felipe, it would be nice if you could explain the rationale for the instrument. So what is the exclusion restriction, that sort of thing? You can do that later as well if you prefer.
Okay.
No.
Okay, I'll do that later, okay? So when I finish, I have some slides here talking about this. So talking about the association and the validity and robustness of our instrumental variable approach, we have the correlation between the fraction of entrepreneurs per class and the individuals which were children of father or entrepreneurial mothers, and the correlation was around 36%. So in order to use the instrumental variable approach, the only way that the this effect could be transmitted to an individual is through the peer. For example, I am a children of a parent entrepreneur, a dad entrepreneur. Okay, so my friend, my peer, cannot interact in a regular basis with my parents, because which could lead to an influence from my parent, my dad, to my friend. So as the nature of the courses of BFRN are 2 periods, and which means the individual goes to the school during like from 8 to 15 o'clock. So we assume that the interaction is very low with the parents of the friends, okay? So we assume that the only way that this influence could be transmitted is through the peer, all right? And we estimated some pro-bit and IV pro-bit models. I would like to highlight that these coefficients are the pro-bit coefficients. So in our results, we present as average marginal effects, which means that it's possible to analyze. You know. But I would like to show that the pro-bit, the coefficient is almost 4 times higher than the IV pro-bit coefficient. So, which means that we could use the IV pro-bit approach because the parameters are very different. So we tested, and then we decided to use the IV pro-bit during our robustness evaluation, okay? So due to the nature of the pro-bit coefficients, we used the average marginal effect of the explanatory variables, okay? So this is the first table, all right? So this is the first model that we estimated. So our variable of interest is the fraction of entrepreneur per class, okay? Which means that if an individual has a fraction of 1% percentage points of entrepreneurial classmates, this is associated with approximately 0.7 percentage points in the propensity to start a new business in the future within 5 years after graduating, okay? So we can observe, we controlled for a lot of variables as CGPA and income, gender, father entrepreneur, mother entrepreneur, and our parameter is almost the same in all the models, okay? And I would like to talk about the results that we found in our first research question. So the literature highlights several transmission mechanisms through entrepreneurial peer effects, okay, that could influence classmates to start a business. Among them, we can mention sharing of resources and information about access to capital and obtaining credit, development of entrepreneurial skills, information about risks associated with entrepreneurship, diffusion of business opportunities, and non-pecuniary rewards, such as status quo, which leads to an increase of the utility of an individual to become an entrepreneur. Okay, so we're going now to our second research question, because which means that we, in this table, we are looking the effect of gender homophily. Okay, we are testing the gender homophily hypothesis. And as you can see, the only parameter statistically significant was the transmission between male peers to male peers. Okay, so We didn't find any significant effects between female peers to male peers, male peers to female peers, and female peers to female peers. Okay, and it's important to highlight that our rate of correctly classified observations was about 86% in the first model, in the model that classified male peers to male peers. All right, okay. So the variable of interest fraction of male entrepreneur peers, sorry about that, peers, had a positive and statistically significant effect at 1%. Thus, the increase of 1 percentage point of male peers is associated with a rise of 1.42 percentage points in the probability of an individual opening a new venture. Okay, the effect on the transmission of entrepreneurship between male pairs corroborates the findings of Marcussen and Rowe, 2017, who found that the average marginal effect coefficient of having male class peers is associated with an increase of 3.44 percentage points on the probability of starting a firm. Okay. Of course, we are not trying to compare parameters. It's just a reference. Okay. And I would like to highlight our main findings in this working paper, okay? So our results indicate that having entrepreneurial classmates positively affects the likelihood of an individual to start a new venture. Furthermore, we found that there is a significant effect between male and same-sex peers, and we found no evidence that women are influenced by peers in the propensity to start a business, regardless of the gender of the peers. Okay, so that's it. I would like to thank the committee and the others presented in this session. So I'm now able to answer the questions. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Felipe. Great presentation. We have some questions on the chat. Paulo has 2 questions. Do you want to speak up, Paulo, or do you prefer that I read it?
Read is better.
Okay. So the first question asked by Paulo is, so first he left a comment for you to take a look at the Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal. There may be papers there with a valuable insight for you. But he asks first about the group of students. So why is this group of students important? Are there more entrepreneurs in that group vis-a-vis other groups? Why did you choose this group specifically?
Okay, so thanks for the advice of the strategic journal. Okay, and SCJ, yeah, right. So we choose this group. There are a bunch of reasons that made we choose this group. Okay, first of all, in regions like Rio Grande do Norte, my state, the rates of finishing an undergrad course is really low. You know, so in many contexts, entrepreneurship is a way to escape from poverty, or a way to to have an occupational job. So first of all, in this context, specifically in Brazil and in Northeast, it is important to understand the drivers of the entrepreneurial behavior. Okay, and we have in comparison to UFRN, the rates from EFRN is almost twice higher than the rate from students from UFRN. So it is important to say that for our context, for Instituto de Tecnologia, it is important to to understand the impacts of entrepreneurial activity and finding ways to foster this kind of way of choice, of occupational choice. And also, we have the opportunity to access this kind of data set that allowed us to select this group. So it was, for us at least, it was a good idea when comparing to a university, because in university, as I said before, you have the possibility of mobility between the classrooms. Okay, so in this context, in the IFRN, you don't have this possibility. You have to stay at your classroom unless you dropped out. You know, you don't have this mobility. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah. So then Paulo also asked if you were clustering standard errors at the individual level, or at what level are you clustering your standard errors?
Individual levels. Individual
Okay.
levels. Okay.
And Paulo also asked about the mean of the dependent variable. Do you recall it?
Okay, so our dependent variable is a dummy. So we track if the individual, after graduating, if he became an entrepreneur within 5 years. Okay, so 0 if he choose some other occupational choice. Okay.
Okay, but do you recall what is the mean value? For instance, how many people actually become entrepreneurs?
Oh, I'm so sorry. About 10%. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Then Charles also asked a question here. I don't know if you want to speak up, Charles, or I can just read as well. Well, I'll just read it. So he asks that how do you control for the institutional effects, for instance, the effects of UFRN, once the institution can contribute strongly to the formation of individuals' subjective norms? Do you have any comments on that?
Okay, so a weakness of our paper is it was performed only with students of one institution. Okay, so
Right.
we don't have the opportunity to evaluate effects from the institution. Okay, because we don't have a counterfactual.
You don't have variation there. Okay. And finally, Paulo also asked, why did you guys not use the interaction between the gender variables? Instead of like splitting samples, why did you just simply not interact the dummies?
Oh, okay, we did that actually, but we choose to present in this way, but we did that with sensitivity analysis, so we ran a lot of regressions. Okay, but the final version is available. Okay.
Okay, and so your results remain robust when you do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
They remain.
Okay. Okay. Great. My only question was the one I asked during your presentation. It was not clear for me what was the exclusion restriction for your instrument. If I understood correctly, you're using the peers father or mother profession as an instrument for a person's choice, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So then you're arguing that this would only affect the choices of that particular peer and not the choice of the focal person, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But we control to the focal individual. We control the variables of father and mother. Choice, okay?
Okay. I don't know if anyone else has any additional questions. I don't think so. So we can maybe move to my presentation. Then if anyone has additional questions, we can ask them at the end. Could you please stop sharing your screen so I could share mine?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So great. Now moving to my presentation. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
All right. So I'll present this, which is the 4th chapter of my dissertation. It is still pretty much work in progress. I'm still collecting data. I have a last round of data collection this week. And I've been struggling a little bit with the framing, especially in the theory part. So any comments are really welcome. So the motivation for this paper starts with the idea that many companies nowadays are increasingly relying on independent workers or entrepreneurs as important stakeholders, not only for their quote unquote social goals, but also for the business models. So we can talk, for instance, about Avon, which has a very well-known model of direct sales. We also have Uber services or Uber-ish services and many platforms that rely on entrepreneurs as key value creation vectors. But interestingly, we also see a similar sort of concern among social businesses or firms that intend to deliver not only profits or value to shareholders, but also social impact. So there are lots of socially oriented business or impact-oriented businesses that rely on specific stakeholders who are entrepreneurs or independent workers that also help these firms create value. So I highlight some of these examples here. I'll discuss some of them briefly. So for instance, Delight is a company that produces solar energy, essentially solar energy projects, but they have a very strong line of solar energy powered devices for like poor people. And they are really strong in Africa, especially Kenya, Angola, and so those very poor countries of Africa. And one of the things they do is that they partner with entrepreneurs in very poor regions of these African countries. And these entrepreneurs become their selling points. So you have, for instance, a guy who owns a small store in a very small city or village in Angola or in Kenya. And then the company comes and trains that person to become a service provider, to start selling the company's products in the village, you know. So then Kidame Mart follows a similar type of approach, but this is a different place. I think Kidame Mart is at a different country. I think Angola, if I'm not mistaken, but I have to check that. But again, this is much more focused on female entrepreneurs. But what they do essentially is that they transform small stores in villages at these poor sub-Saharan countries into sellers of their products, you know. So that it's a way of getting their products into the hands of very poor people who need those products, but would never be able to access them. We also see a similar sort of strategy in the CSR strategies of large companies. So for instance, Unilever has this program called Cabizig, which is in the Philippines. And the program essentially partners with female entrepreneurs, and it offers some training to those entrepreneurs so they can improve their ability to, for instance, they run their own small stores, and they receive from Unilever training to improve their selling abilities. But then they also start selling Unilever products, and according to Unilever, this has boosted the sales of Unilever products in those small villages of the Philippines as well. So connected to this idea, I am interested in looking at this like poverty-stricken context where you have entrepreneurs who are interested in, who want to do something for a living, as Felipe just mentioned in the Rio Grande do Norte. But then I'm interested in a particular strategy through which the firm that is interested in delivering services to these poor people, a strategy that this firm can use. So I ask whether in this context, the provision of service provision capabilities to these entrepreneurs could help, you know, diffusing the services offered by the firm, and also could improve the performance of the service providers. So in other words, I have like a larger company who wants to deliver services to these poor people, and it partners with entrepreneurs to actually get these services delivered. So my question is whether the firm can improve the delivery of those services by training, by providing training and increasing the capabilities of these entrepreneurs. So in principle, there could be some sort of tension there because the firm cannot control what the entrepreneur is going to do with those capabilities. So entrepreneurs can just learn those capabilities and use them to sell another type of services, for instance. So that's why I see a tension there, and I want to study that in more detail. And to do that, I'll do essentially 3 different things. So first, I'll develop a general model. So this is a very simple model. The idea here is just to formalize the discussion around how these capabilities may affect the incentives of the entrepreneur. And so I'll develop this very general model. I'll just talk about service providers in general. I'll then specify which services I want to talk about more specifically, which are fintech services. So I'm interested in firms that are, you know, that seek to deliver financial services to poor people. And so I will essentially take the propositions of this model and derive hypotheses based on those propositions for a more context specific type of setting, focusing on the on fintech services. And then I'll test those hypotheses using data from a field experiment. This is essentially what I'll do. So first, I'll just present the basic ideas on the model. I won't be presenting any complicated equations or anything like that. So the model I propose is a simple Stackelberg model with endogenous entry. So I have service providers who choose quantity. This is consistent with the idea that in this context where entrepreneurs are service providers for larger companies, they essentially, or most times, don't get to actually choose prices. So they can only choose how much time they're going to devote to that activity. So I model that as in terms of quantity choices. So I assume that there exists one service provider, SP1, who operates in a given geographic market with an inverse demand, a linear inverse demand, like simple one. And then there are n-1 potential service providers who can join this market and can also start offering the same services. So the model is simple. So at the initial time, service provider number 1 operates in the market, and she chooses the quantity that she sells in the market. At time 2, the n-1 potential SPs will decide whether or not they enter, and they decide that simultaneously. And then they decide, given that they enter, how much they're going to choose. So this is just a 2-step model. It's quite simple, as I said. And then I model the marginal costs faced by these service providers in order to capture the effect of this service provision capabilities. So here, K represents the service provision capabilities, which is my main, of course, my main variable of interest here. So I assume that these service provision capabilities can generate efficiency gains. So they can actually reduce the marginal costs of the service provider. But these effects vary as a function of the experience that the service provider accumulates. So here H denotes the service provision experience. So I essentially argue that the marginal returns to these capabilities, they are decreasing in the experience. So the effect of these capabilities on costs is are lower for SPs with higher experience providing the services, right? I also assume that these service provision capabilities generate demand spillover. So this is akin to an effect of improved quality. So essentially, if the entrepreneur or the service provider becomes more able of providing a service, the quality increases. So then this can increase the demand as well, the market demand level in that specific market. And so to solve the model, I use backward induction, no secret there. And as I said, I initially used this model to derive some very general propositions of how service providers would behave. So I derived essentially 3 propositions. So the first proposition is, of course, that an increase in service provision capabilities will increase the provider's service sales. So providers will sell more if they have more capabilities, which seems a bit obvious, but we're going to see in the data that may not be that obvious. The second proposition is that this effect is asymmetric according to the experience of the service providers. So I argue that the effect would be stronger for providers with low experience in providing the services. And this is the rationale here is just that these guys have a higher efficiency gains from those capabilities, essentially. And finally, the third hypothesis is that when service provision capabilities generate sufficiently low efficiency gains, an increase in these capabilities may increase the number of SPs operating in the market. So here there's essentially a trade-off between the efficiency gains and the demand spillovers. And if these efficiency gains are too high, the SP that is already established in that market will reap all the gains. So then this will disincentivize or de-incentivize other entrepreneurs to join. On the other hand, if these efficiency gains are small, then the demand spillovers can be relatively large, and then it is possible that an increase in service provision capabilities will increase the number of SPs operating in that market. So these are the three general hypotheses I derive. Based on these three propositions. So based on these three propositions, I now derive some hypotheses that I'm going to take to the data. As I said, I'm interested in app-based services. I'm talking about fintech services specifically. So I'll be talking about in the hypothesis about app-based services. So here we have a firm that creates an app, and we have a bunch of service providers who use the app to offer services to their own customers. So these are entrepreneurs that have their own businesses and they're using the app to, for instance, offer additional services to their customers. So the first two hypotheses are connected to the first proposition. So I hypothesize based on that proposition that there's going to be an increase in the app-based sales of SPs, independently of their service provision experiences. And so an increase in service provision capabilities will increase app-based sales for both types of SPs. But I then also hypothesize that this effect would be stronger for SPs with low pre-existing experience in providing app-based services. So we should see a stronger effect in the case of the low experience individuals. Also, this is in line with the third proposition, with the second proposition. Now, from the third proposition, I derived two empirical hypotheses. So the first one is that an increase in service provision capabilities of an SP with high app-based service provision experience will lead to an increase in the number of SPs offering the same services in the market. So the idea here is that these individuals would have lower efficiency gains, as I said, from the capabilities. So in their case, we should see a spike in the number of SPs that also offer the same service within the market when those guys are trained, when those guys have more capabilities. It's hard to say the same for individuals with low experience, just because of the reasons I exposed before. But we could say something about a comparison between these two groups as well. So we could say or argue that the effect predicted by H3, in case it is also observed by two individuals with low experience selling the app, we should see this effect stronger for individuals with high app-based experience, service provision experience, right? So these are the four hypotheses I'm going to take to the data. And I won't be coming back to those hypotheses, but I'll refresh them in your mind as I speak once I test them. So now I'll talk about the empirical context. I'll investigate in more detail. So this is the context of a Brazilian fintech. So the firm, as I said, partners with entrepreneurs, and they only aim especially very poor cities in the country. And they are specifically or especially strong in the Northeast and in the north of Brazil. And so the company offers app-based services that include bill payment, recharges for mobile phones, and other services that are nowadays known as digital wallet services. So, but the difference from a regular digital wallet is that they don't, their focus is not to actually have the final customer downloading and using the app. Instead, they have like an entrepreneur who owns a business, and that guy will use the app to offer the services to his or her own customers, right? And so the motto for this company is to reduce transaction costs for poor people. So they essentially argue that by leveraging partnerships with entrepreneurs, they are actually reducing the transaction costs to final customers. So to provide some evidence on that, we conducted like a very broad and non-causal survey-based study. So this preliminary study had no idea to be actually causal or anything like that, but we tried to measure the extent to which this is true. So to what extent does the firm is the firm associated with the lower transaction costs for customers, you know? So what we did is we selected 10 cities. So we chose 5 cities where the company operates. And then I chose 5 other cities where the company does not operate, but there are cities that are quite similar to the first ones. So for instance, they are similar in terms of HDI, in terms of income, in terms of other populational sort of characteristics. And so the major difference between these cities is that in 5 of them, the company operates, and in 5 of them, the company does not operate, right? So then we send a person to those cities to interview people. We interviewed almost 50 persons in each of those cities. And we asked basic questions about transaction costs. So for instance, how many minutes per week do you spend like paying bills? How many kilometers do you have to cover weekly to actually pay your bills? So that sort of basic question. And we concluded that in cities where the company operates, the respondents reported an average of 11 minutes less to pay bills per week compared to cities where the company does not operate. And we found similar results for how much money they spend paying bills, for instance, taking bus to pay a bill or something like it, to go to the bank and pay a bill, or to getting out of your house and going into a lotérica or into a bank to actually make those payments. And so in cities where, for instance, where the firm operates, those individuals, they had to cover almost half a kilometer less per week to pay bills. So there is some evidence that the presence of the company is associated with decreased transaction costs. Although, as I said, we cannot claim that this is causal, right? So then in this context, we ran a field experiment with 291 entrepreneurs that are service providers for the firm. So these are mostly from different cities. All of them are from the northeast of Brazil, but they are from most of them come from different cities, so they are physically separated. And this is going to be important for our results later. And what we did, so what I did with the company essentially was to come up with a remote mentoring intervention. So the company carried out the intervention by themselves, but we thought about like short interventions where we had like some of the company's managers call randomly assigned entrepreneurs to receive some mentoring on how to sell more, how to use their app better, how to integrate their app into their business, how to like attract more customers to their own business using the app, all those sorts of like basic sales and marketing hints that could be useful but also could be related to the app, right? So the intervention was carried out between October 2019 and January 20. And in the intervention, we stratified the sample not only according to the type of business that the entrepreneur has, but also according to her service provision experience. So we divided into two groups, essentially a group with high service provision experience and a group with low service provision experience, like to try to replicate what the model that I just showed is actually predicting, right? So then I'll now describe the sample. I have essentially two different samples, a sample and a subsample. So the first sample is at the service provider level. I'm comparing like service providers among each other. And so here table 1 shows the 5 types of business that we find in the sample. So we have cyber cafes, which are LAN houses, clothing stores, computer shops, stationery stores, which are livrarias, papelarias, as we know here in Brazil. And so we try to come up with a balanced sample in terms of the types of business as well. So, but essentially we randomize within each of these groups, and we separated, as you can see here, into groups, high service and low service experience. So then we randomized within each of these groups. So we went within each of these each of these cells right here, and selected half of the people to receive treatment, half of them to receive to go to the control, right? So here in table 2, we see that it's just essentially showing you that the samples, the treatment and control groups are balanced. So here we see a bunch of observables, of observable characteristics for both control and treatment groups. And we see that there are no statistically significant difference between them. So this is the t-stat for the difference between the means of the group. So this is just to show that our randomization worked well at the SP level. So then for some of the analysis, I'm going to look at the zip level, zip code level. And so here what I do is to essentially take the original sample and to drop all individuals, all zip codes, zip is just SAP, right, here in Brazil. So we drop all SAPs that had more than one entrepreneur operating. So we just stayed with the zip codes where a single entrepreneur operates. Single entrepreneur not operates, but a single entrepreneur participating in the experiment, right? So in other words, in this subsample, we don't have more than one entrepreneur per zip code in our experiment. There can be more of them operating in the zip code, but only one of them participated in the experiment. This is going to be important, as I'm going to explain later. And here in the bottom, the table 5 essentially shows the same thing for this zip level sample. We have a pretty balanced sample. No significant differences between the treatment and the control groups. So we may conclude that the randomization works well. So then to the results. So what I'll do, I will essentially use a simple diff and diff specification, since I have randomized treatment selection. And in this first set of results, the dependent variable is the app-based sales. So I intend to understand how the intervention impacted the app-based sales of service providers, right? So then in model 1, we see that the first hypothesis is supported. So for individuals with low service provision experience, an increase participating in the intervention increased the app-based sales. Yet we don't find a similar result in model 2, So for high service provision experience individuals, the treatment seems to be at most not impactful, or even to negatively impact the app-based sales of those individuals. So this does not support hypothesis 1B, H1B. Yet we do find support for hypothesis 2. So there we hypothesize that individuals with low service provision experience would benefit more from the intervention, right? So this is exactly what we find here. So in model 3, we put everyone together. So here we have both low and high service provision experience individuals, and we simply interact the dummy there. And we see that there's indeed a significant difference between those groups. And so we conclude that the second hypothesis is supported. So then we'll look at the zip level results. So the idea here, as per hypothesis H3 and H4, we are interested in the diffusion of SPs across zip codes, right? So we're going to use the second sample that looks only at the zip code level. And here I have two different dependent variables. So the panels on the left used SP diffusion as a dependent variable. This is the log of the inverse of the number of SPs operating in a given zip code, while the panels on the right use just the number of SPs within a given zip code as the dependent variable. And the panels on the right, models 4, 5, and 6, use Poisson regressions, while models on the left use OLS, just like the previous results. So to test hypothesis 3, so which essentially predicted that the intervention would increase the number of SPs operating only in the zip code of a high service provision experienced individual, right? So we find support for this. I find support for this hypothesis. So indeed, following treatment, the zip codes of when you treat an individual with high service provision experience capabilities, high service provision experience, following the treatment, there is an increase in the number of individuals selling or other SPs selling that same market, right? Yet we don't see the same thing for models 2 and 5 years. So we don't see the same result for individuals with low experience, but we also find support for the fourth hypothesis. So we see that following treatment in post-intervention, the effect of treatment is significantly stronger for individuals with high service provision experience. So this supports our fourth hypothesis, right? So essentially, the data seems well consistent with most of our model, my model. But now what I'm doing is that I'm trying to increment this analysis with some additional survey data. So as I said, I have a final round of data collection now, and I hope I'll get data until tomorrow. So I had already one previous, I had actually 2 rounds of data collection, but the second one was not good because of COVID-19. So I'm now collecting data again. And so I'll have a pre and post sort of information on sales, on the total sales of these businesses. And I'm also collecting data on business practices. So I want to understand whether treatment makes the entrepreneurs more, for instance, more capable of operating the app or more capable of selling in general, just because I'm interested in the extent to which I can be sure that the results are driven, in fact, by those capabilities. So I'm trying to collect data on business practices to somehow measure those capabilities. This is essentially what I intend to do until I finish my dissertation. So thank you. I'm happy now to take the questions and comments. Let me just stop sharing the screen here.
Okay, so I'm sorry, congratulations, Leandro. Would you like to read the questions on chat?
Yeah, if you can read them for me.
Sure.
It's great. Thank you.
Okay, we have a bunch of comments and some questions from Paulo Arvati, Paulo José. Okay, so Paulo Arvati comments: independent workers are equal to firm with a single owner like May Brazil, or is informal firms? It's not entry. I think that the correct name is participation of market as individual firm. It's the first comment.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I agree, Paulo, that in Brazil there may be this confusion regarding MEIs or informal firms. None of the firms that I have in my data set, they are MEIs. They are small companies, like EPPs or something like that. So, but they are like, as I said, they are like clothing stores, but they are established businesses. So these are businesses that have, for instance, a physical store, So I don't believe any of them are maize. I have to check. I can check that to be sure later, but I believe most of them have at least one employee, you know, and they don't have many employees, but most of them has at least one. So, but yeah, it could be I could be talking about as you entered, talking about participation as an individual firm in the market. Yeah, I think that would be consistent with my empirics. Yeah, yeah. I was trying to be as general as possible in the model, but I read your point, and I have to check that later. But yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
Okay, well, the next question is from Paulo José. Paulo, would you like to speak for yourself, or can I read the question?
No, you can read. It's okay.
Okay, okay. So Paulo asked, did you think about measuring capabilities of the participants,
Right.
parentheses, individuals, and use it in your model?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this would be really great, but it would be really hard to capture those capabilities directly, you know, because we would need to like have some sort of test that everyone would respond, and it doesn't seem that feasible right now, especially after the pandemic. You know, those businesses were harshly affected by the pandemic. So I think the best I'll be able to do is what I just described. I'll be able to collect data on management practices and then infer their use of the capabilities based on those management practices, which is something that people do like a way of probing the theory of change in management papers, also in economics papers. So I think this is going to be the best I'll be able to do. Hopefully I'll have some nice results there. But I'm so far collecting data on, I have to check the questionnaire, but I don't remember everything out of nowhere. But I know that we are asking them about how much time does it take for them to actually sell a service using the app. So then if if it takes significantly less time for a treated person, we would argue that this would be due to the capabilities. Right, so they are more capable of offering the services. We're also asking them about how the frequency with which they offer the app-based services to their own customers. This would also be aligned with our capabilities. So while we won't be able to directly observe the capabilities, I hopefully will have some data on, like, to indirectly see something there. You know, I think that's going to be the best I'll be able to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Hey, Leandro, next question. Can you explain your measure of capabilities? It is schooling.
Yeah, so I don't have as I said, I don't have a direct measure of capabilities. I have schooling information, but I would not be able to affect schooling I think what Paulo is asking about is more regarding my independent variable, right? So I don't have a specific independent variable of capabilities. As I said, I'll capture that indirectly just to probe the theory of change, but I don't have in the model a direct measure of capabilities, because as I said, these are like specific capabilities, selling capabilities and marketing capabilities, that sort of thing, you know. And
okay, so Paulo recommends that you use a Mann-Whitney test because your sample is not normal. Okay, isn't normal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have to check that. I have not looked at that. Thank you, Paulo. That's good.
Also, Paulo asks, can you show the results per day by using event study?
Per day, I can try to explore that. I don't have that data. I just have like the aggregate sales in the period, you know. No, actually, I think I may have data for a month, you know, like monthly based. I don't know if I have the daily based data, but I can explore that in the future. I can talk to the company to see if they provide me with the daily data. Yeah, I think the idea of the event study would be interesting because the treatment lasted for almost 3 months. So then I could potentially see actually that improving day by day, for instance. I think that is interesting. Thanks again, Paulo. I'll take a look at that. Charles asked here for me to share the paper, and there's a final comment by Paulo, right? Zip level is low. You need to correct. Oh yeah. So here, Paulo, I don't
because
think I have.
Because you are using the cluster at zip level.
Yeah, but I have only one observation per zip, you know. So then it is just clustering at the individual level, you know.
You need to use the bootstrap.
But you mean using bootstrap? But I'm clustering at the individual level, you know.
No.
So,
because
the measure is at the zip level. That's your point.
No, the cluster. You have a low number of clusters.
No, I don't have a low number of clusters. I have exactly this. It is just the same number of individuals, you know, because I dropped, for those analyses, I dropped all individuals who were within the same zip code. So I have only one person per zip code. So this is individual, you know. I have 200 and something zip codes.
But in your results, you are informed that you use the cluster at zip level.
Yeah, for the zip level analysis. So I cluster at the individual level, at the service provider level or entrepreneur level in the first analysis, in the first table, and in the second table, I cluster at the zip code, but just because the zip code is the individual level there, you know. I'm clustering at the minimum level possible in the panel.
I understand now.
Both of them, you know. Oh, thank you. So I don't know if anyone else has any additional comments or questions. Also for Felipe, if anyone has.
No, my main concern is about your sample, because it's a bit small, but you are collecting data right now, right?
Yeah. Okay, so that is an issue. The intervention was a bit expensive for the company because they had people like contacting entrepreneurs for like 2 months, 3 months. And so that was quite demanding. It was hard to scale that, you know. That was my main concern at the beginning. But it is common to see field experiments with smaller samples in this type of context. Hopefully, I'll still get some interesting results from the new data. But yeah, I'm with you on that. It should be larger.
And lastly, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Michael Freese. He's a reference in entrepreneurial field, in entrepreneurship topic. So he has some experiments in Africa. Right now he's conducting one in Congo. So I guess his papers could help you.
Oh, cool. What is his name again?
Michael Freese.
Freese. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'll put here at the chat. Okay?
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks. That's going to be helpful. Thank you. Nice. Thanks, Felipe. So if no one else has a question or a comment, I think we can close our section just 15 minutes earlier.
Eu gostaria de falar algumas coisas. Assim. Eu gostaria de agradecer a presença de todos aí. A gente continua com a área de business. Convidem outras pessoas, divulguem e tal. A gente vai continuar nos próximos anos aí com o nosso trabalho de oferecer essa discussão de pessoal de business que está usando instrumental econométrico e tal, ou instrumental quantitativo, como se diz na área de business, ou como se diz na área de medicina, de biometria. Então, assim, nós vamos tentar continuar com essa área aí, sabe? A gente fica muito feliz de ver as pessoas participando, estando presentes, apresentando seus trabalhos. Então, divulguem a área, por favor, e peçam para as pessoas submeterem novamente. O deadline é para ser julho do ano que vem, e aí a apresentação vai ser em dezembro, desculpa. A reunião, para vocês verem, é uma reunião barata, perto das outras reuniões que tem no Brasil, para as pessoas participarem. Ela é esse ano foi subsidiada, acho que a gente vai tentar continuar fazendo com essas coisas. E aí você tem sempre algum retorno aí da sua participação, né? A gente espera que isso que seja fundamental para as pessoas. Está sempre participando para fazer essa reunião continuar, tal, e a gente continuar unido aí, sempre trocando ideias, tal. E aí, estou sempre disponível. Qualquer coisa que vocês precisarem, escrevam para mim ou para o Sandro, que é um outro cara que também está ajudando bastante a construir essa reunião e esse espaço, tá ok? Eu agradeço a todos aí.
Obrigado, Paulo. Obrigado, pessoal.
Parabéns, pessoal. Até mais.
Valeu, pessoal. Um prazer. Até mais. Até a próxima.
Parabéns a todos aí. Um abraço.
Um abraço.